The world is watching Gaza. Each headline seems to bring a new promise. Ceasefire imminent. Historic peace deal within reach. And yet, as civilians suffer and negotiations stall, one question echoes across the globe. Why do ceasefire deals in Gaza always fall apart? What invisible forces are sabotaging peace? And is it just politics? Or is there a deeper economic and technological conflict at play? Tonight, we'll peel back the curtain, not just on the headlines, but on the money, the mistrust, and the digital battle lines that shape every truce. What you're about to learn will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Gaza conflict, and it might just explain why no one can seem to stop the war. Before we dive into the latest round of failed negotiations, let's zoom out. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is among the world's most deeply rooted disputes, a human drama stretching across generations, shaped by land, identity, myth, and memory. But at its heart, Gaza is also a story about power, political, military, and yes, economic. So what is Gaza, really? It's a densely populated coastal strip, home to over 2 million people. Since 2007, it's been governed by Hamas, classified by Israel and the U.S. as a terrorist organization. Israel, citing security threats, imposed a blockade, tightly controlling what and who enters and exits the strip. Egypt, too, enforces its southern border. For most Gazans, the result is an economy under siege. Unemployment soars, infrastructure crumbles, daily life becomes survival. Why the blockade? Israel argues it's a shield, essential to stopping attacks. But critics see it as collective punishment, deepening resentment and fostering extremism. The blockade is not just a political measure, it's an economic stranglehold. According to the World Bank, Gaza's GDP per capita has fallen sharply, with nearly half the population unemployed. Electricity, clean water, and basic goods can be scarce. For many, the economic squeeze feels as punishing as the bombs. That's the setting every time war erupts, and why each round of violence only deepens the humanitarian crisis. Over the years, attempts to end it have come and gone. Ceasefires are declared with great fanfare, then unravel within weeks or months. The reasons? They're complex, overlapping, and often hidden from the nightly news cycle. Let's look at the most recent attempt. This spring, after almost 20 months of brutal fighting, a new U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal landed on the table. The terms sound simple: a staged release of hostages held by Hamas in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, a temporary ceasefire, Israeli withdrawal, and the massive delivery of humanitarian aid. But as the world held its breath, the talks broke down yet again. Hamas demanded amendments, ironclad guarantees from Washington, clearer schedules for releasing hostages, unimpeded food deliveries, and most explosively, a promise that Israeli forces would fully withdraw. U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff, no stranger to tough negotiations, called the demands totally unacceptable. Israel approved the original framework. The Americans pressed for urgency, but the gap widened. The war ground on. Why can't these sides bridge differences? Part of the answer lies in the past. Every ceasefire is haunted by the ghosts of broken promises. Khaled El-Jindi, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, put it bluntly: Hamas's insistence on U.S. guarantees reflects a deep-seated skepticism about the reliability of international agreements. To them, words on paper aren't enough. They want unbreakable commitments, enforceable timelines, and a say in implementation. Israel, too, has its scars. Years of failed deals have fostered deep mistrust. Many Israeli officials fear that any withdrawal will simply give Hamas time to rearm, dig deeper, and prepare for the next conflict. And there's a harder truth. Israeli public opinion is deeply divided. Some want negotiations and peace, others see continued military pressure as the only answer. Caught in the middle are the mediators: Qatar, Egypt, the U.S., even the United Nations and Europe, desperately trying to broker compromise. Each has its own interests and red lines. Egypt fears conflict spilling into its own restive Sinai region. Qatar juggles its role as a mediator with immense pressure from all sides. The U.S., with elections looming and credibility on the line, must show results. The United Nations and the EU, meanwhile, are scrambling to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. And while diplomats argue, the situation on the ground grows ever more desperate. A stunning report from the World Food Program. Last week, Palestinians in Gaza, desperate and hungry, blocked and offloaded 77 food trucks carrying desperately needed flour. Aid that should have saved lives was diverted, highlighting the chaos, mistrust, and breakdown in order. The United Nations, forced by Israeli authorities to use dangerous, unsecured routes, faces looting and violence from both armed gangs and desperate civilians. It's not just logistics, it's about control. Israel accuses Hamas of siphoning off aid, fueling its war machine. Hamas denies large-scale diversion, pointing to the devastation inflicted by months of bombing. Into this mess steps the newly created Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a joint U.S. and Israeli-backed group distributing food with armed contractors. The foundation says it's a safer, more reliable alternative for aid. Critics, including many aid groups, say it's the militarization of humanitarian help, aid with a gun at its back. This, too, is a new front in the battle for Gaza. Underneath it all, the economic effects ripple outward. Shipping routes have been upended as global firms reroute vessels to avoid the eastern Mediterranean, facing skyrocketing insurance costs and security risks. Every day this conflict drags on. It's not just Gaza that suffers. Egypt, Israel, Lebanon, and even distant markets feel the pressure in commodity prices, insurance rates, and lost trade. But the economics are only half the story. There's another battlefield, one that rarely makes the news: cyberspace. While negotiators meet, cybersecurity firms report a surge in sophisticated phishing attacks targeting diplomats and aid organizations. Hackers, some state-backed, some freelance, are striving to steal secrets, disrupt humanitarian logistics, and shape the information war. For every truck of flour blocked on a dusty Gaza road, a digital sabotage may lurk in the background. This is economic warfare in the 21st century, invisible but no less deadly. Meanwhile, as missiles rain down and blackouts sweep Gaza's night, Hamas's military wing is racing to develop advanced drone technology, improvised but increasingly deadly. Israeli defense officials scramble to adapt, fearing that today's homemade drones could soon become tomorrow's precision-guided threat. The arms race isn't just tanks and tunnels anymore, it's software, surveillance, and silicon. And as the bombs fall, the world watches. The UN Security Council debates resolutions to improve aid access. The International Criminal Court expands its investigation into war crimes, attacks on aid workers, deliberate targeting of civilians. Europe tries to launch direct financial aid to Gaza's battered families, even as its own member states argue over the right approach. So where does all this leave the people of Gaza, the children, the shopkeepers, the families holed up in darkened apartments? According to Gilead Sher, a former Israeli negotiator, a sustainable ceasefire requires more than silence. It needs a comprehensive plan for Gaza's reconstruction and governance. For now, such a plan seems as distant as peace itself. And yet, the fighting continues. Israel claims major strikes on dozens of Hamas targets. Hamas retaliates with rocket barrages, sometimes landing harmlessly in open fields, sometimes not. Aid groups count the bodies. The war machine grinds on, openly and in the shadows. Here's the chilling reality. Even if a ceasefire is announced tomorrow, without addressing the economic blockade, the digital arms race, and the underlying mistrust, the cycle of violence is likely to continue. As Tamara Kaufman-Wittes of Brookings warns, a ceasefire alone is insufficient. A political horizon for Gaza is essential for preventing future escalations. But with each new proposal, the same obstacles rear their heads. Who guarantees the peace? Who delivers the aid? And how? How do you rebuild trust in a region where every promise is seen as a potential trap? And what role do the unseen forces, economic interests, cyber sabotage, technological leaps, play in keeping peace perpetually out of reach? Tonight, as negotiators haggle and families wait for the next bomb or bout of hope, we're left with a haunting question. Is peace in Gaza even possible while the economic blockade, technological arms race, and unfathomable mistrust remain unresolved? Or is every ceasefire just a temporary pause, an uneasy truce in a far bigger, deeply entangled conflict? In the next half, we'll explore the secret motivations driving each side, the high-stakes gambles in the tech war, and whether a breakthrough is even possible. But first, let's grapple with the most urgent question facing every mediator. What would it actually take to turn a ceasefire into lasting peace, and who stands to win or lose if it happens? As the world watches, the deadlock in Gaza feels both tragically familiar and acutely dangerous. While ceasefire documents circulate from Washington to Doha and envoys shuttle between capitals, the future remains clouded with both peril and possibility. So what paths could unfold from here, and what are the unseen stakes for all involved? Looking ahead, several scenarios loom on the horizon, each shaped by the choices of political leaders. and the hopes and fears of ordinary people trapped in the crossfire. The most likely outcome, according to many analysts, is neither peace nor all-out war, but a grinding stalemate. Violent flare-ups punctuated by fragile lulls could become the new normal, with both sides maneuvering for tactical advantage, while civilians pay the ultimate price. It's a future in which hope recedes, humanitarian crises deepen, and a restless region remains a powder keg. But this is only one possible future. There's another, a broader regional conflict. Egypt's military has already ramped up its posture along the Rafah border, and the risk of escalation drawing in neighbors is real. As cyber attacks and drone strikes spill beyond Gaza, global shipping routes have already shifted, insurance premiums have soared, and international investors are quietly withdrawing. One shipping executive recently stated, "For the first time, even the Suez Canal feels unsafe." The ripple effects from Gaza now reach every corner of global commerce. Yet, amidst the grim warnings, a third scenario is possible, a breakthrough leading to reconstruction and hope. For that, the ingredients are daunting, but not impossible. It would demand radical compromise, a genuine withdrawal of Israeli forces, ironclad international guarantees, sustained delivery of aid, and, most importantly, a political horizon for Palestinians. As H.A. Hellier of the Carnegie Endowment warns, without a real vision for Gaza's future, any ceasefire is just a pause before the next explosion. This vision resonates not only in diplomatic chambers, but in the daily lives of those living in shattered cities. In Gaza, ordinary people are desperate for something more than an uneasy truce. They long for jobs, homes, and a future for their children. In Israel, public opinion is fracturing, with increasing numbers questioning whether ongoing military campaigns are achieving any real security. "We are tired," one protester in Tel Aviv told reporters. "We want the hostages home, and we want an end to endless war." And then there are the silent actors shaping events from behind the scenes. The hackers who target negotiators with phishing attacks, the armed contractors now distributing food instead of aid agencies, the international courts sifting through evidence of war crimes. Technology is transforming war and peace alike, making every click and keystroke a potential flashpoint. At the heart of all these scenarios lies a bitter truth. Every actor has something tremendous to gain or lose from the cycle of conflict. For Hamas, the prospect of ironclad U.S. guarantees is not just about this ceasefire, it's about survival and legitimacy. For Israel, security is both a real concern and a political necessity, but the cost of perpetual war is mounting, both economically and morally. Aid organizations risk irrelevance or worse, becoming pawns in a militarized aid game. And for regional powers like Egypt and Qatar, the stakes include both border security and political influence in a volatile region. Even global consumers, perhaps far from Gaza, are beginning to feel the knock-on effects in their shipping costs and cyber vulnerabilities. So what will it take to actually break the cycle? First, it means recognizing that ceasefire is not peace. As Tamara Kaufman-Witties of Brookings puts it, ceasefire is a tool, not a solution. Without political progress, ceasefire is just a bandage on a festering wound. Second, the international community, including the US, EU, UN, and regional players, must move beyond symbolic statements to deliver real, enforceable guarantees. This means credible monitoring mechanisms, robust economic support for reconstruction, and honest engagement with all parties, even those seen as adversaries. As Gilead Share notes, no ceasefire can last without a plan for who governs, how Gaza is rebuilt, and who ensures accountability. Third, for Palestinians, hope cannot be rebuilt with concrete alone. Jobs, education, and a sense of agency must be part of any genuine roadmap. For Israelis, true security will only come when their neighbors have something to lose by returning to war. For the viewer, this all matters more than it may seem. Conflicts like Gaza's are not just distant tragedies. They are test cases for how the world addresses intractable problems in an era of instant information and interconnected risk. What happens here can shape the tools, technologies, and alliances used elsewhere, from Europe's borders to the South China Sea. So what are the practical takeaways for those watching from afar? First, beware of narratives that reduce the conflict to simple villains and heroes. The web of interests and grievances is tangled, and real solutions will not arise from slogans or ultimatums. Second, understand the role of technology, not just in battle but in shaping public opinion, securing negotiations, and delivering aid. Sophisticated cyber attacks and information warfare are now as pivotal as bombs and bullets. Being aware of how information is manipulated can help viewers demand more from their media and political leaders. Third, support organizations engaged in credible humanitarian work and hold them accountable. The militarization of aid is a warning sign, not a solution. Examine which charities are operating transparently and look for those that advocate for both immediate relief and long-term peace building. Fourth, demand more from international policymakers. Ceasefires without justice and reconstruction lay the groundwork for future crises. If you live in a country with diplomatic leverage, use your voice, write to representatives, participate in discussions, and urge policies that tie aid and diplomatic support to measurable progress. And finally, cultivate empathy for both the Israeli families fearing rocket attacks and the Palestinian children trapped in rubble. Understanding the human cost is the first step in resisting numbness and cynicism. As we draw to a close, let's return to the question at the heart of this story. What would it take to turn a ceasefire into lasting peace, and who stands to gain or lose from breaking the cycle? The answer is uncomfortable, but clear. Lasting peace in Gaza, and in the broader region, can only emerge if all sides confront their deepest fears and take genuine risks for change. For Hamas, this means prioritizing the welfare of ordinary Gazans over political brinksmanship. For Israel, it requires facing the limits of military power and engaging in difficult political compromise. For the international community, it demands more than hand-wringing, real investment, honest mediation, and willingness to stand behind guarantees with action, not just words. And for those who profit, politically or financially, from endless war, the loss will be greatest. The loss of control, influence, and ultimately, relevance. Cycles can be broken, but only when the incentives shift and the cost of violence finally exceeds the price of peace. Here's a secret not often discussed. More than any speech or signature, it is the silent pressure of public opinion, global, regional, local, that can tip the scales. Every protest, every demand for accountability, every viral story of a family reunited or a hospital rebuilt adds a grain of weight to the fragile balance. Change, in this conflict and others, has always come from unlikely places and unexpected voices. If you learned something today, don't let the story end here. Share what you've discovered, question what you're told, and stay engaged as the situation evolves. The future of Gaza and the future of peace depends not just on politicians or soldiers, but on all of us who care enough to look beyond the headlines.